Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this afternoon session. We're really excited about this. We are going through the iFormBuilder integration with Microsoft SharePoint, Dataverse, and Power BI. We have some familiar faces on today's call. So if you've been using Zerion for a while, you'll recognize these names and faces. We've got Ben Ray and Chris Reichart. And with that, Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi, thanks a lot, Barrett. And I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. I've been having a little audio issue, but it sounds okay. So yeah, we're really excited about presenting here today. And as some of you may know, we've been involved with Zerion for a long time, and we've kind of doing some of our own things with Critical Data Group and really focused on workflow optimization and doing a lot of other tools with it. So if Ben we can put the slide up of kind of what Critical Data Group is doing these days. So you know, with this interaction and with meeting the group here, we're excited to share how we're working and trying to help Zerion and iFormBuilder customers leverage the data they've captured, whether it's the new data they're capturing or the historic data that they happen to have. And we optimize the workflows. Our kind of tagline is like, if you can imagine it, we can build it. And I think you know, the biggest thing with doing really good workflows is understanding that, you know, it's not just paper to digital or those type of things. It's really about understanding, you know, what you want to happen, and usually we can make that happen. And a lot of things that's happening a lot with iFormBuilder as well. So we, you know, work with the existing tools as much as possible. So we're not trying to get people to buy things. And that's obviously why what we're presenting today is how we interact with leveraging your Microsoft ecosystem and the tools you already have. And what you're going to see is the other thing we really do is if there's not a solution that exists, we try to build that, and we try to make something that will be usable to the community, and also something that can be, you know, tailored for each individual, but also something that could be a tool, as you're going to see here in a minute, that can be used by anybody. So with that, I'll hand it off to Ben, and thanks again for this opportunity, and we look forward to the Q&A session at the end, and Ben will take it from here.
Thanks, Chris. Hello, everyone. Good to see everyone again. Just a quick background on myself. I worked at Zerion for about, what, 8 or 10 years. And you know, since then, I've been doing a lot of consulting and integration work, and that's kind of how Critical Data Group came to be. So, you know, really excited to be sharing how we can work with iFormBuilder data inside of all of our Microsoft environments today. So just to piggyback off what Chris shared, right, here's some of the sorts of things that we've been helping organizations do with their data, right? So one thing's just, you know, creating custom Power BI dashboards, right? A really popular thing as well is integrating with Microsoft 365, right? Using SharePoint and Dataverse, which we're going to show a lot about that today. And then a lot of times organizations are looking for like PDF and Word documents to be outputted. So we help kind of build those custom things and really automate those workflows. And we have something pretty special to show you here later that we'll show kind of towards the end here, but it's a custom connector between iFormBuilder and SharePoint that we've developed. So those are just some of the solutions we deliver. But I think, you know, enough about us. We want to learn a little bit about the audience here today. We wanted to start out with a quick poll. So maybe Barrett, if you could pull it up, I think. So the first question we'd like to understand is, how often do you report on your data? We want to know, are you doing this daily? Is this something you do like weekly or monthly, yearly, or do you not really report on your data too much?
All right, Ben, so we have almost half the audience has responded. So I'm going to give it another second to see if any more responses come in, and then I will close the poll and share the results.
Perfect.
So about 67% of the audience responded, and here's the responses. So it looks like a lot of monthly ones. So
okay, nice. Yes. No, that's good.
Let me go ahead and start the next poll then. Are you ready for this one?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So yeah, well, so the next one here is really, how do you report on your data, right? So you said you report on it monthly for the most part, which is great, but what are the tools that you're using? Are you using Excel, Power BI, or other reporting tools? I mean, there's plenty out there that we see a lot of organizations using.
Okay, so we have almost, I'll wait to see if we get the 67% again, and then I'll share them. the results. Oh, we have even more than that now. Great. So I'm going to close the poll, and this is what we're looking at. So more than half use Power BI.
Okay, great. Well, that's perfect because that's what we're going to get into today. So, all right, so let's get into it. All right, so why we're here today, right? We're going to talk a little bit about integrating your iFormBuilder data into your Microsoft environment, right? The main reason for this is we see a lot of groups struggling with this in general because it costs you time and money to move your data over. It's really frustrating, and it just is. You really need that data in real time to take your reporting decisions from like a monthly report to getting that to a weekly or even a daily or up to the hour types of reports. So what we're going to go through today is how to take iFormBuilder data and get that inside of SharePoint. SharePoint's going to work for pretty much most groups in general, unless you have like over 30 million plus rows. Then you're going to need to look at a solution like Dataverse or something like that Microsoft has. But storing data in SharePoint, and then you can easily report off of it by linking up your Power BI directly to a SharePoint table or integrating that with Excel or Word or anything like that to do that. So I think we wanted to go through quickly just the challenges here, and I'm sure a lot of you all are familiar with this, but one is just time consuming and pretty costly, right? We did a little research on here and looked at like, what does it take to move data from iFormBuilder into SharePoint, right, to report on it, right? And if you're doing this across 50 forms, you spend a couple hours per form, this starts to add up across the course of a year, right? And the reason for that is because one, you have to do this for every single form, and you have to do this like every single month, right? And then the other reason is you maybe don't have, or you have a lack of developer resources that are needed to like automate this sort of thing. So today we're going to propose a couple solutions and kind of show you how all those work. So let's get into it. So obviously first, you can just manually move your data. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail because we're all probably familiar with this, but you extract it, export it out of iFormBuilder, then import it into SharePoint. This works pretty well. It's pretty simple. You have a lot of control, but it takes a long time, and you just really can't scale this thing, right? It's only as up to date as the data that you are, or as often as you're doing this. So let's look at this option, right? iFormBuilder and Power Automate, and then sending that data to SharePoint. So the most common thing that we see and where I recommend everyone start here is using Power Automate. Power Automate's a free automation tool, pretty similar to like Zapier, that is probably included with every Microsoft subscription, right? We have a really basic Microsoft subscription, and we have Power Automate in our subscription included, right? And then you also have SharePoint included in most of your subscriptions as well. So this is the tool to use to do that. So I'm going to go over how this is set up in a quick demo here. And if there are, I know we have time for questions at the end, but if there are any questions after this demo, we can maybe stop and answer some of those as well. So let's just talk a little bit about this first. So let's pretend we have some data in iFormBuilder. So here's a real simple work order form that I have here with a bunch of rows in it, right? So what we want to do is we want to first make sure we have our form. Then what we want to do is we want to open up our Power Automate environment here. So I have a Power Automate environment here. I've created a really simple flow. I'm just going to open up this flow and show you all what it kind of does here. So in Power Automate, what you can do is you can basically make different connectors here. So this is a trigger here, and this trigger is a webhook where you could send data to from iFormBuilder, right? So we'd add in our trigger, and if I just go through the rest of this flow quickly, you'll kind of see what it does. It goes in here, it creates the item in SharePoint, and then if the priority of the work order is urgent, it'll send an email to in this case, I have it sending to Chris, right? It just says, hey, there's, an urgent worker has been created, please take a look at it, right? So here's a really, really simple Power Automate flow. And as you can start to see, you could keep adding on to this flow for your own custom sort of use case. But basically, so what I did was I had my form, I created this little flow, and then I took the webhook that I have here and I went back into iFormBuilder and put this inside of the form assignment settings. That's where you can set up webhooks in there. And what that's going to do now is when I submit one of these records, it's automatically going to send it into this flow, and then it's going to execute what this flow is going to do. So it's going to create the item in SharePoint and maybe email Chris if the priority is urgent. So let's just do a little test of that, and I'll show you kind of how this all works. So I'm going to go in here. I don't have my device pulled up, so we'll create a record here the old-fashioned way inside of the system here, and we'll say this is going to be a repair. Let's make the priority urgent, so then Chris will get an email here, and we want to have this due by the end of the day today, and we'll assign it to Jeff, and we're going to say fix the leak, and I'm just filling out some other general data around here. And then we'll put in a photo. So I'll find a simple photo here of like a faucet leaking, and the status, the basic status will be pending, right? So this is just going to simulate a device submission. So when I hit save, what this is going to do almost immediately is it's going to post the webhook to Power Automate. So I went back to Power Automate here. Let me just show you. It's pretty cool. It shows the history of all the different previous runs you've done. So you can see here, 11 seconds ago, something happened. So let's look at what happened in here, right? Data came in here, it created the item here in SharePoint. Then it went and it emailed Chris because the email, or because the priority is urgent. So that's basically how you'd set up that sort of thing in Power Automate. And then if I go over here into my SharePoint list, I've set up a real simple SharePoint list in here, and I mapped all the fields inside of my flow to from the form to here, right? So you can see they're all in here. Let's just refresh it, and we should see a new row that was created with our photo in it. Here it is, right? So now we have this one. It's fix the leak. Here's all the details about this item, and then the team can work with it inside of here, right? So that's pretty much how you'd use Power Automate to integrate your iFormBuilder data there. And it's going to work really, really well, because now this is set up, and you're going to be able to just continue sending data in. It's going to automatically go inside of here. And then this is in SharePoint, and you can do whatever you need to with the data once it's inside of here. And then I'm not sure if folks have used this, but inside of a SharePoint list, if you hit like integrate and Power BI and hit visualize this list, it'll try to generate a report for you directly, which is pretty cool. I don't have the best data in here for this because it's just a couple records here, but it's going to generate a report for me that's already kind of pre-built, and now I can tune it to my exact needs. So that's just kind of an example of how that report would look. I know this isn't the prettiest report because it's kind of automatically generated here, but you saw there how fast it was to just basically, have a flow that writes right to the SharePoint list, then go into this list, create a Power BI report, and it's good to go. So I guess before we move on, is there any questions or anything in the chat that we maybe wanted to go through here before we move on to the next piece?
Not yet, Ben. I think most people are waiting for the end to ask their questions.
Perfect. Okay. So I think in general, right, this, like I said, this works pretty well. The only downside is you have to do this for every single form, right, that you set up here. So in the long run, you probably have in your account, and here's our sample account, you would have a bunch of different flows inside of here, and they would all be for different forms that you'd have. But in general, pretty straightforward to set up here. And now whenever you make changes and things, you have to come in here and adjust this, but this can work pretty well for most organizations. All right, so let's go back here and we'll kind of move on to a couple other things. So next, I wanted to talk about just the pros and cons of this in general, right? And this is an automated thing, right? So once you have it working, it's going to continue running. It is pretty flexible. You can do a lot of filtering and different error handling and custom workflows you want. And you can build in multi-step things off of this, right? So let's say you want to send it to SharePoint, but you also want to send the data to 3 other places. You can do that inside of Power Automate. Now, the downside of it is there is a learning curve, right? It's kind of like using Zapier or any of these automation tools. You have to learn how to use them. There is obviously potential for errors if forms change and that sort of thing. There are some performance limitations on it, and overall, just you have to manage a lot of automations as your program grows, right? Which can become complex and hard to track. But overall, I think a pretty good solution that'll work for most organizations. So what I wanted to do next is talk a little bit about some stuff we've been working on, and we're calling this our CDG connector. And really, what this tool does is it's pretty awesome. It basically takes every single form you have inside of your iFormBuilder account and will automatically create them as a SharePoint list inside of SharePoint. So then you can report on that data. So if we look back to what we did with the where was it, the Power Automate stuff, right? You have to build a new flow for every single form, which obviously works. But in this case, this just automatically looks at every form in your account, and then we'll create them all as lists with all the data in them. So you really don't have to do anything in terms of integration, right? You use the connector, and the connector is going to be able to do that for you. And then from there, you can report off of this. So let's, I'm going to demo and just kind of show how this is working. We set this up in our environment, in our SharePoint environment. So let's go in here. So how this works is it basically looks at all the forms in your account. So for this demo, I have just a small account. We have 4 forms in here, work order form, a couple others here. And this vehicle incident one has subforms attached. It has a photo subform and a couple other subforms here. But as you see, they all have, a couple records in them, right? A couple thousand in these, and then just a couple in these other ones. And what this does is, if you go into SharePoint and you want to see all the lists you have in your SharePoint account, you go into this little site contents area. And what you're going to see here is you're going to see all the forms in our account, right? We saw the work order form, we have a test form, we have a vehicle incident report, right? All the forms in our account are created as lists here. So when I add a new form, it's going to add it into here and then load the data in for that form, right? If I make a change to a form, it's going to add the change into this SharePoint list. So let's just open up one of these. Here's the work order form. And what you're going to see here is this is all of your data directly from iFormBuilder in here, right? Our ID field, our parent record ID, I mean, all these things here. And then once we get past our metadata fields, we go into our actual fields here, right? So we have our work order type, priority, due date, all these fields in here. So then in general, right, if I would add a new column in the form, right, let's call it, completion date in here. The next time this thing runs, this updates every couple hours, it would add the new field in here, and then new data would begin flowing in automatically for that without you having to make any changes on your end. So it's really, really powerful if you're really not looking to do too much to integrate and get access to your data. Use the connector that we offer here and work with us on it, and then you'll really be able to automatically get your data into here, and then you can build all sorts of reports off of this. Right, here's a real simple work order dashboard I built that's just running off of this data, right? So we're looking at work orders by type and who it's assigned to and when they're due and the priorities and all that sort of thing, right? But most of you are pretty familiar with Power BI, so you probably are building even prettier dashboards than this pretty basic one I'm showing here today. But that's really the new connector that we're releasing. So we have it working right now, and we're looking for organizations to take advantage of and use this connector. So then you really just have your data immediately in SharePoint directly from all of your forms here. So a couple other things I wanted to mention on this. So how this works is this updates we have it set to update every 6 hours right now. We can obviously do that more often for organizations who need their data in possibly more real time, but it does support any form changes. It supports updates. So let's say you change a record and save it, it'll support the changes to the record and all that sort of stuff. So it is very, very powerful, but the main benefit is, if you're a Power BI team, you just go in your SharePoint site contents here, find the form you need here, which is created as a list, and then you simply report off of it. So we'll go back to the presentation here. But in general, I think, look, this is pretty powerful in general. And as I compare it to the other options that we talked about here, the main benefit is that you don't really have to do anything, right, from your end. Like there's no time investment to really get the data to be moved over, right, because it automatically does this, right. It's pretty efficient, it's pretty scalable. It handles all the different forms in your single profile, or if you want to go across multiple profiles here. But obviously this costs something, right? We're offering this as a service to organizations, and you do have less control overall, because it's always going to make your parent form is going to be the way the form structure is in iFormBuilder, right? Your subform is going to be the way the form structure is in there. So I think, just a little recap of what we went through here before we kind of get towards the end of this and go through a couple questions, is we talked about kind of two ways to work with data in general. One is using Power Automate, right? For those of you that are looking to set up your integrations on a per form basis and have a lot of customization, this is a really good option for you, right? Set up your webhooks, receive the data from iFormBuilder, map it to your SharePoint list, and your data's there moving forward, right? We also showed the CDG connector that we have. This really basically takes those forms and those records and syncs them directly into SharePoint lists, right? And this is going to be really good for folks looking for a hands-off way to sync all past, current, and future form data. So you really don't have to do anything moving forward to get access to your data inside of Power BI and SharePoint. And here's just like a high-level overview of these things. And I think it really depends, right? As an organization, I think we all should kind of think about, how often do we need our data, right? In general, if we don't need it too often, right, and you have a couple forms, you can probably get away with manually doing this, right? But as a scaling organization, you want to look more towards the bottom two options, where using Power Automate to set up a custom integration per form, or using the connector to really just automatically do all this stuff for you, right? But it all depends, I think, on what the scale is that you're all looking for in terms of growth and the number of forms that you have and how often those change and all those sorts of things. So, we'd obviously love to work with all of you on how to, connect your data with the reporting tools that you're using. So if you do want to scan this QR code, you can contact us. Obviously, we'll go through, we'll share out our contact information to everyone here, but you do have some of it here if you want to schedule some time to chat through this. But in general, I think we wanted to go through and see, what maybe if folks have any questions and want to talk a little bit more about that, because I know we kind of showed all this stuff pretty briefly, but I'm happy to double click and show some more specifics for anyone.
Hey Ben, we did have a few questions come in, and I'm sure a few more will come in as we go through this. So the first question that came in was, does the Power Automate process work for forms with subforms? And I know you briefly talked about that. Do you want to touch upon that again?
Yeah, definitely. No, it does. So now this is where I'm saying there is a slight learning curve on it. So let's look at the data that came in here. So, and I know I'm getting a little technical here, but here is the actual data here that we have the parent record. And now in this case, I didn't have one with the subform, but the subform would be in here as an array, right? So you'd have to, inside of Power Automate, you'd have to do a branch in here, and you'd have to say loop through those subforms and do something with them, right? If you wanted to write them to a separate list, you could make a loop in here. So we've done that for a number of organizations as well. But again, it's really just a slight learning curve on how to use them. This is a real simple example of doing it just with a flat form. But subforms definitely are doable inside of here.
Great. And there's another question that came in. Can the connector also write changes in the data back to iFormBuilder instead of only writing data from iForm to SharePoint?
No, it's a good question. Right now, it's only working one way, right? So from iFormBuilder into SharePoint, but you can, we are looking at ways to set up writing it back on there. The key is the data has to be in sync exactly. Another option to do that is you basically do that in Power Automate as well, right? You'd set up a flow that does the opposite of this, right? So we did that. We have two clients that we're doing that for now, actually, right? We just set that up. So they have basically a SharePoint list in here. They have a list in here, and then whenever the list changes, then it fires off and updates back a lookup table inside of iForm. So definitely doable. The connector does not support that. It's only a one-way connector right now. But I think we could look at doing something like that for sure.
Great. And then we have the question, are you planning on adding a connector to SQL Server?
SQL Server, no, that's a good question. At this point, we just have the SharePoint one. We certainly can do that. I mean, the point of the connector is it's pretty universal, meaning it works with JSON data as is there, so it's definitely doable. I think let's definitely discuss that, and we could look at that. Or what is it? SQL Server is just a little more involved because there's a lot of firewalls and things that you have to work through versus SharePoint's, always accessed and open on the web on there. But yeah, definitely something to think about.
Great. I know we do have a lot of customers, even with what we saw today during the presentations. A lot of folks are using Power BI and SharePoint. So I think this is really helpful to show a way to get the data in there and how it can be done. So thank you, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
As of right now, there aren't any other questions. So I'll give it another second to see if any more come in. But if not, just thank you for your time today and thank everyone on today's call. I really appreciate all of you taking the time and effort to join us on all these sessions, and I hope that you got a lot out of it. We will be following up with recordings and resources later on so that you have access to them and can review if you need to.
Yeah, and Barrett, please, I just wanted to step in and say, anything you say, it's kind of like back to our tagline, if you can imagine it, we can do it. Just hopefully this got people's minds thinking about how they want to manage their data, what they want to do. So please feel free to, anything that comes through from this and says, questions, also right now it does it with every form. The idea with the connector is we could potentially manage what forms you wanted to go to SharePoint and not. So we're driven by the customer's needs and wants. We're not going to make assumptions. So, the more things that come through, it's going to help make a better tool for everybody. So really appreciate any feedback.
Well, awesome. I know what I think what you guys are doing is really neat, and especially because you understand iFormBuilder data and you've been around it a lot. So I think I think this is great. If there are any other questions, just send them along in an email. And everyone else, thank you so much for your time and your effort, and enjoy the rest of your Friday.
Thanks, everyone.